looking at rulemaking around implementation of Second Substitute House Bill 2151, which reassigns the authority for cannabis lab accreditation from LCB over to Department of Agriculture. I'm going to go ahead and share my slides before we get started. Hopefully I can do a better job sharing them. Okay, there we go. So today we're talking about Second Substitute House Bill 2151 and also a related bill, House Bill 1859, and hoping for stakeholder feedback on some draft rules that we have available implementing these two pieces of legislation. I'm Denise Laflamme. If I haven't met you previously, I'm a policy and rules coordinator at LCB. And below is my email, and then also the email to our rules inbox that's checked by all of the rules coordinators, rules@lcb.wa.gov. And again, I put the link to these slides in the chat. So if it's easier for you to follow along or refer back to that, those slides, you have that in chat. Oops. There we go. So just to tee up today's discussion, the objective is to obtain stakeholder and public feedback on draft rule language to implement these two bills. And we're looking for feedback today or any subsequent feedback that you might have, you can email to the rules inbox. So just some housekeeping before we get started. These sessions will be recorded. You probably already heard that. And because we are recording them, they are subject to public disclosure, just so that you're aware. And the purpose of the recordings is to make sure that we just have a record of all the discussion. And we will be posting the recorded meeting on our website. And the Teams chat will be on, and also similarly, written comments and questions in the chat will be saved in our rulemaking file and are subject to public disclosure. Questions and comments in our team chat, I may be able to respond to them in real time, but we might not be able to get to them till later on in the session. Participants are muted, and we will unmute you when we see your hand raised. So when we get to questions, if you want to just raise your hand, and then we will unmute you. And if you'd like to submit questions or comments afterwards, our rules inbox again. So just to go over some background, this rulemaking is being proposed to implement legislation concerning the transfer of responsibility and authority for cannabis testing laboratory quality standards and accreditation from LCB to the Washington State Department of Agriculture. 3 bills are implicated in this transfer. House Bill 2052 from 2019, House Bill 1859 from 2022, and Second Substitute House Bill 2151, which passed last year. House Bill 1859 from 2022 was requested by LCB and the Washington State Department of Agriculture. That's abbreviated WSDA there. This legislation created interagency coordination team that we now call the CLASP group. You may have heard of that. This bill reassigned the responsibility for developing cannabis testing lab quality standards from LCB to Washington State Department of Agriculture, directs agriculture to establish lab standards in rule, specifies cannabis labs must adhere to AG's lab quality standards, and clarifies cannabis labs must obtain and maintain accreditation. Second Substitute House Bill 2151 passed last year, reassigned the transfer of authority for cannabis testing lab accreditation from Department of Ecology to Department of Agriculture using expedited rulemaking. House Bill 2052 in 2019 originally transferred authority from LCB to Ecology for accreditation, which was reassigned last year in 2151. 2151 authorizes Department of Ag to collect fees to support costs for implementing lab accreditation and lab quality standard programs, and then also directs Department of Agriculture and the interagency coordination team created previously to act cooperatively to ensure effective implementation and administration. So just laying the groundwork today for the scope of this rulemaking, and then also around what we're hoping to discuss today is implementation of these bills related to lab accreditation and lab quality standards. The scope of the rulemaking removes lab accreditation and lab quality standards language in LCB rules and references Department of Agriculture rules. The rulemaking looks to align terms, technical terms and testing terms with Department of Agriculture's new rules around accreditation and lab quality standards, which are 16309 and 16310. The rulemaking is looking to clarify some certification requirements, require labs to notify LCB of changes in Department of Agriculture accreditation status, remove quality assurance standards tables in 314.55.109 and reference those same tables in 314.55.102 just to simplify reference to the quality standards, and then replace Washington State LCB acronym with LCB. And that is just related to ongoing cleanup that we're doing in rulemaking, changing the acronym from WSLCB to LCB. And so what's not really included in our rulemaking scope and what really is sort of outside the scope of the conversation today is other open rulemaking. If you've been following rulemaking happening in LCB around cannabis, we have quite a few rulemaking sets open right now, including cannabis waste, cannabis samples, and minors on non-retail premises. And so we're hoping not to get into any specifics related to those other rulemaking projects. We also are not looking for feedback today on other WAC sections unrelated to lab certification and the lab quality standards. And also not really on the list for today's discussing proposed legislation currently under consideration by the legislature. And then if there are questions related to Washington State Department of Agriculture WACs around accreditation or lab quality standards, we would just refer you to the Department of Agriculture around those types of questions. And then also other questions around compliance with current lab reporting or compliance with current CCRS requirements. That's something that we're not planning on talking about today. So just wanted to kind of lay that out for people. And responding to questions. So our main goal today is to hear your feedback. If other questions come up that we need to look into or get back to you, we can do that. And again, if you put any questions in chat, we will follow up with you. And then again, you can reach out to our rules inbox. So just to give you the lay of the land in terms of our project timeline, July 1st this year, the two pieces of legislation went into effect, House Bill 1859 and Second Substitute 2151. And those both resulted in the new legislation from Department of Agriculture, Chapter 16309 WAC related to lab quality standards and 16310 related to lab accreditation. July 17th, we filed the CR 101 for this current rulemaking that we're undergoing to transfer lab accreditation and lab quality standards over to Department of Agriculture, and it was filed with this WISR number. If you do download or go to this PowerPoint presentation online, all of these links work, so that will help you get to any of these hyperlinked addresses. And so we are looking at stakeholder engagement this week to get your feedback on the draft rules that we posted last, like a week ago or 10 days ago. And from here on out, we're looking at tentatively filing the CR 102 with proposed draft rules at the end of this month at the February 26th board meeting. After that, that would open public feedback period on draft rules that would run until the public hearing, April 6th. And we would hope that we would file the CR 103 after that on May 10th with rules effective June 10th. So that is our tentative timeline at this point. So just wanted to make you aware of that before we get into the meat of the discussion today, looking at our draft rule language. So getting into the rule language, we are proposing changes to 6 of LCB's WAC sections. We are looking at repealing WAC 314.55.1025 related to proficiency testing, and also WAC 314.55.103 related to good laboratory practice checklist, as those relate to lab quality standards. And we are looking at amending 4 sections, 314.55.1, 0995, 102, 1035, and 109. And so I'm going to give you kind of like an overview of what the changes are to those 4 sections, and then we'll go into the specific rule language. For 0995, we're looking at removing the term accreditation from our rules, since we don't have authority for that any longer. That's moved to Department of Agriculture. We add references to Department of Agriculture's rules around lab accreditation and lab quality standards. We clarify some conditions around certification, which is under our authority. And that includes maintaining some elements that were in WAC 314.55.103, specifying some requirements and timelines, and adding a notification requirement, just so that labs let us know about any changes in their accreditation status. And then also the housekeeping issue that I brought up before about changing WS LCB to LCB. For under 314.55.102, again, removing the term accreditation and referencing Department of Agriculture rules. We're looking to align some terms with Department of Agriculture rules, align subcontracting of parameters with Department of Agriculture rules, align reporting to CCRS format, clarifying some requirements, and then adding a reference to DOH rules. WAC 314.55.1035, again, clarifying some language, removing reference to the 2 sections we are proposing to repeal, adding notification requirements, removing certification fees language that was in there, and then remove reference to proficiency testing requirements. And under 314.55.109, replace accredited with certified for testing requirements. Again, just a process of removing accredited language in our rules, accreditation language, removing quality assurance testing tables and referencing essentially those same tables that are in 314-55-102. And again, aligning terms with Washington State Department of Agriculture rules. And so we go into the specifics. And again, we have a link I put in the chat to these rules if you want to look at those, or are, especially if you can't see this very well on your screen because the font is pretty small. But as we go through this, this is 314-55-0995. You can see, oops, we are removing the old acronym and reference to their vendor or meeting LCB's accreditation, and we are replacing that with a third-party laboratory must be certified by LCB and meet Department of Agriculture accreditation requirements under Chapter 16.310 WAC. Licensed producers and processors may not have a financial interest in a certified lab, just clarifying that language. And then there's just some cleanup in terms of replacing lab with laboratory and using our most current acronym. Oops. We are keeping the requirement under 3A that each lab must employ a scientific director responsible to ensure the achievement of maintenance of quality standards and must possess the minimum qualifications as described in Chapter 16.309 WAC. These other elements of qualifications are currently in 16.309 WAC, and so we reference that there. Under 09953B, certified laboratories must follow the analytical requirements under Department of Agriculture rules. For this section in 3C through E, we clarify some requirements around certification and then pull in some and retain some required information that had appeared in 314-55-103. Certified laboratories must be accredited by Department of Agriculture. A laboratory must provide the following documentation to LCB when applying for certification, and this is just spelled out. Their most recent audit report from Department of Agriculture, the scope of accreditation, listing their accredited parameters, proof of current accreditation, and their contact information. LCB will provide a certification letter to laboratories. This is just explicitly written out. Laboratories who are applying for certification indicating approval or denial, and then letters that issue certification approval will include the following information. Maybe I'll just stop there and see if anybody has any questions on this part so far. If anybody has any questions, they can put in the chat. Otherwise, I'll just continue on. And Tierney will help us also, will help point out to me if anybody has their hand raised. The next section in 0995, clarify certification timeframe and also some of the cleanup. LCB certification of a laboratory is valid for 1 year, just being explicit there. Laboratories must apply for certification renewal each year to maintain their certification. And then also just clarifying laboratories need to provide their documentation to LCB at least 30 days prior to their certification expiration. Certified labs must allow LCB to conduct physical visits and inspect the laboratory and testing and related records during normal business hours. This actually is not being changed from what is in there currently. This was a holdover, so it will just read the way that it does currently: to conduct physical visits and inspect related laboratory equipment, testing, and other related records during normal business hours. We were trying to make it more clear, but we're just going back to the existing language in case anybody had a question about that. Certified laboratories must report all test results directly into LCB's traceability system within 24 hours of completion. Again, this is some holdover requirements from WAC 314-55-103 related to reporting into our traceability system. And I see we have a question from Tom. Tierney, do you think you could unmute?
Yep, Tom, you should be able to speak.
All right. Hi, this is Tom with Treeline Analytics. If you just wanted to go back one slide, I just had a comment on the previous section of the 0995. Maybe one more slide. It had to do with the LCB coming on site and being able to look at the equipment, the records, and everything else.
Let's see. This one, yes.
Perfect. Yeah. So one of our suggestions, I guess, was, I mean, we're happy to, have the LCB on site, come inspect the premises, any records or anything like that. One of the questions that we had to do with the equipment and the testing specifically. These, in my opinion, the oversight of our equipment and the oversight of our testing methods has been transferred over to the WSDA. So I would like to see this change to premises and records. We must allow the LCB onto our premises and able to view any related records. But I do not think that the equipment and the testing should be included in here.
Thank you. Anyone else have comments about that section? Okay, thank you for that. Where was I? So moving on to 0995-3I and J. This adds notification to LCB and also references Department of Ag rules. A certified lab must notify the LCB of any change or potential change in their accreditation status with Department of Ag within 48 hours of the change or notice of potential change. And this includes any notices received from Department of Agriculture. And the board may suspend a laboratory certification if the Department of Agriculture revokes or suspends the laboratory's accreditation under Chapter 16.310 WAC, or if the laboratory conducts testing under this chapter outside of their approved scope of accreditation. This is just to be clear about these items. And this is just additional cleanup and referencing Chapter 16.309 WAC Department of Agriculture rules, or in a couple of places. So, okay, before we move on to 102, does anyone have any other comments about the changes to 314-55-0995? If not, we'll just move right along. 314-55-102, this relates to quality assurance and quality control. The first part here, we just remove accreditation terminology and reference Department of Agriculture, the correct Department of Agriculture rules, which is 316.310 related to accreditation. Here we're just aligning terminology with Department of Agriculture rules and changing screening to testing, which is the terminology in their rules, and makes sense here. Again, aligning some of the language and referencing Department of Agriculture rules. And also aligning with Department of Agriculture rules in terms of allowing laboratories to reference out samples for any of their parameters to other labs that are also certified by the LCB. This section looks to align with current CCRS reporting format and clarifies retesting authorization. The first part, F, looks at some recent changes to CCRS reporting, just to align with that. And then section 3 here just clarifies that the following analysis and testing are only required for samples that have not been previously tested or that have been authorized by the LCB to retest following failed quality control testing. That's just for some clarification there. Again, here we're just aligning terms with Department of Agriculture terms, replacing screening with testing or inspection to align. For this table, we are just making these changes to align with current CCRS reporting format. Here we're aligning terms with ag rules and also clarifying retesting and certificate of analyses. Laboratories may not reference samples for conducting retesting of samples for fields of testing they have already analyzed. We're removing the restriction for the subcontracting out for only certain testing parameters, and then indicating that all test results that were subcontracted to other certified labs must be indicated on the certificate of analysis, including the name and certification number of the laboratory. And here we inserted a reference to Department of Health rules, chapter 24670, just to be clear. A certificate of analysis issued by a lab for any cannabis product subject to the requirements of this chapter and also the requirements from Department of Health. Do we have any questions about changes to 314.55.102 at this point? Otherwise, we can move on. So now we're getting to the rule language for 314.55.1035. This is laboratory certification, suspension, and revocation language. This is just a kind of correcting a typo. Evidence the certificate holder owner made false statements in any material, including but not limited to, doing some cleanup to insert LCB, remove WS LCB's vendor, inserting LCB, And then also just removing reference to the two sections that are being repealed and inserting a broader reference to 314.55 WAC. These changes relate to requirements for reporting accreditation changes to LCB. If the following violations are subject to the penalties as provided in B of this subsection, if the laboratory fails to notify the LCB of changes in accreditation status with the Department of Agriculture as required under 314.55.0995, which we talked about a little earlier. This includes failure to notify the LCB of any notices received from Department of Agriculture. And I see that Tom from Treeline has his hand up. Tierney, would you mind unmuting Tom for us?
Yeah, I think, can you hear me?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. So yeah, this, with this amendment here, happy to notify the LCB about, any changes to our accreditation. My question is, what is a potential for future change to accreditation? That's where I think that this gets a little vague, and that may come down to interpretation as opposed to actually notifying them of when a change is happening. But what is considered a potential for future change to accreditation is my question.
Okay. Thanks. I think this goes back to earlier. Let me just get back to that. Just providing the different notifications. Just go back and it really relates to this section here. This includes any notices received from AG which identify a potential change to accreditation, including but not limited to notices to correct, notices of intent, or other administrative notices. But thank you for that comment. We'll definitely keep track of your comment there in terms of that language. Did you want to add something else, Tom?
Nope, just took my hand down. Thank you.
Okay, hey, thank you. Okay. Oops, that's not what I wanted. Sorry about that. We're just going to scroll through it all here. Okay. And then moving on, changes to this section 314.55.109. So we're leaving 1035 and we're moving on to section 109, cannabinoid additives, requirements, restrictions, and quality assurance testing. Here we're removing the term accredited and replacing it with certified under this chapter, aligning terminology again with Department of Agriculture, rule terminology replacing screening with testing. And there are several tables in 109 related to quality assurance testing and limits for metals and solvents and microbiological and mycotoxin levels. And instead of having essentially duplicate tables in 109, we are removing those tables and referencing essentially the same tables in 314.55.102, just to simplify that. Also, it addresses some issues related to differences in metal units in the two that appear in two different places, but that would resolve that issue. Okay, that's it. That's what we got. Anyone have some comments or questions they'd like to provide? I see Beth has her hand up. Tierney, would you mind unmuting Beth for us.
Yep, Beth, you should be able to unmute now. You click the microphone icon. There you go. I see it.
All right. I think you guys can hear me.
Yep.
Yes.
So I'm Beth with Confidence Analytics. One thing I just wanted to note, particularly with this first year of the WASDA accreditation, is I do have some concerns about issues with the timeline for the documents that the LCB wants for the lab on their side, and as well as what WASDA is going to want for their audits and all of that. Our meetings thus far with WASDA, they've stated that our existing LCB accreditation certificates will be valid until their current date. So that leads me to believe that the lab audits will happen when the certificates expire, which means the labs will not necessarily have an audit report 30 days prior to their certificate expiring. Along with the fact that during an audit, it does take time for them to provide audit reports. And then we have, the 30 days for any deficiencies or corrective actions that might need to be dealt with. So I could potentially see there being an issue where, especially this first year where we're still riding along on our LCB certifications, the labs aren't going to have the documents that LCB wants before our accreditations as they stand now would expire. I don't know that there is a plan in place to deal with that at this point, but I can definitely see it being an issue in the coming months as lab audits start. I believe the first labs are in like May and June. So it's not that far away. So just wanted to draw some attention to a potential clash of timeline there.
Thank you. Okay, thanks for raising that issue. And I'll be sure, I think we have folks at LCB on here, so who will want to know about that. So anyone else have any other comments they'd like to provide at this time regarding any of these changes or other potential conflicts they see with the draft language that we have? Okay, well, let me just get to the back over here and we'll just oh, well, that's today's stakeholder session. And again, any things that you think of after this meeting, please send it to us in the rules inbox. And again, this is the timeline that we are looking at tentatively right now. So since we're trying to get the CR 102 filed at the end of this month, we would really like to hear any comments that you might have sent into our rules inbox, by the end of next week at the latest, that we could, use to incorporate, or at least, have available as we're finalizing the CR 102 to file draft rules. And if there aren't any other questions or comments, I think we're going to be done today. Again, all these materials are on our website. And thanks very much, everyone, for being here. Thank you.